Okay, hi guys. Cool. Thank you for sticking with me through Antichamber. I know there were a couple of those segments that were a little trying, probably for some of you, especially if you knew what you were doing better than I did. There were definitely a couple of moments that were for me, I just like I part of what I want to do during this Q&A is talk a little bit about my overall player experience with this game, because it was really interesting and different than a lot of games that I play, and generally extremely positive for me. But there were a couple of moments where there were sort of specific, distinct mechanics. And I'm thinking about the pulling both ways puzzle, and I'm thinking about getting up the elevator using the elevator block mechanic, where it took me like a whole segment. It took me a good half hour of doing nothing in the game but like staring at a puzzle or a block, or like kind of walking around in circles examining an area of the screen, and eventually having it sort of click that here's a thing that I can do that I didn't realize I could do, and now that changes everything. And I can only imagine what that was like for people in chat who knew what I was supposed to be doing, who sort of had that knowledge and made that connection, and were just sort of watching me spend a half an hour not getting it. But for me as a player, I have to say, like, there were some moments that were difficult because the game doesn't because it's non-linear, honestly, because a game like Portal is so well defined. I'm just going to talk about Portal now. Every play-by-play, right? I have to talk about Portal. I'm pretty sure that's in my contract. A game like Portal is delineated so clearly. This is the room that you're in. The room is going to contain everything that you need in order to get to the exit. Like to solve this puzzle. Everything you need to solve the puzzle is right here. But in this game, there were definitely moments when I would encounter a puzzle, and maybe it's not strictly true. Like maybe there are actually ways that I could solve those puzzles. But given the gun that I had, it would have been much harder or perhaps impossible for me to solve the puzzle that I was looking at. And so there's a tendency for me, not to necessarily want to engage with every puzzle because I don't know whether or not I can solve it. So I felt like that kind of screwed up my progression a couple of times. It didn't, in general, screw up my experience with the game because the game provided lots and lots of all other places for me to go. So every time I got stuck on a puzzle and felt like I need to progress this way, but I can't figure it out, if I turned around, and frequently it was literally just turning around and walking the opposite direction, like that first puzzle, I would find something else that I actually could do. So I was able to sort of make forward progress. And even at the end of the game, looking at the map seems very incomplete. It seems like there's lots of stuff that lots of puzzles that I could still go back and solve. So there's a nice pacing to the fact that there's always something for me to do. I never ran out of content that I could work on and puzzle over. But there were a couple moments when either the game did a good job of directing me, or the game did a pretty good job of directing me, and I got encouragement from outside the game that helped direct me to, here's a puzzle that you can solve. You don't need anything else. You just need to understand a mechanic that you don't understand. You just need to sort of put some pieces together. And there's a huge difference to me between that moment of especially pulling both ways. Pulling both ways is a fantastic, fantastic puzzle that I literally just needed to spend a good deal of time messing around with it, experimenting with it before I figured out what I could do. And then when I figured it out, it clicked. Like it felt really good. It felt like I had not only accomplished something, but I had really learned something. Like the game had really taught me something. So it was, that was really exciting. That felt really good for me, even though I spent a long time, I invested a lot of effort into like not solving that puzzle, into like trying different things. It felt like the game was sort of, it wanted me to learn. And so that sort of moment of actually figuring it out felt really, really good. Compare this to, for example, an adventure game like Grim Fandango, where a lot of those puzzles don't feel like learning. I don't feel like I've accomplished something if I solve a puzzle, in the sense that I progress the story forward. But it doesn't feel like that like here's a thing that the game has sort of given to me. So part of this, I think, for me, is I'm processing this right now. I had a conversation yesterday or the other day with a friend, a student at USC, and we were talking about the role of the designer and whether or not that is fundamentally antagonistic. And I think I posted a Storify about that conversation. If you want to look at my Twitter, you can find it. But one of the things that I sort of was thinking about while we were having that conversation was Antichamber feels like it's trying to teach me. It's trying to help me learn. It's not like holding my hand. It's not telling me exactly what to do, but it's showing me a problem and saying sort of, you can figure this out. Just keep trying, you'll figure it out. And then when I figure it out, I feel this incredible it feels like it's not that I have overcome something that the game challenged me with. It's not that I have beaten the game. It's not that I've bested the designer in sort of solving this puzzle. I feel like I learned the thing that the designer wanted me to learn. I feel like, in the conversation I say, I feel like a kid who is sounding out words in a storybook. And when I successfully do it, it's hard, right? Like you struggle. You can imagine if you have a younger sibling or have interacted with a kid of that age who's learning to read, it's really, really difficult for them. And you look at them and you sort of think, well, this is easy, right? I know how to sound out words. Why can't you just do it? But it's hard for them. And then when they get to the end of the page, they beam, right? They just sort of feel so good. Or just like when they successfully get a word, and you feel the word that I want to say, although I use it in a different context, naches is one of the cool interactive media emotion words that I like. There are a few different emotions that are not passive. They're agency based. They're emotions that you feel because you have a role in an action. And naches is essentially the pride that you feel for the pride that a parent feels in the accomplishments of his or her children. Uh, and often when I reference that in terms of games, it's because games are the only media, because they're interactive, where the player can feel something like najes or fiero, which is a sense of accomplishment, because those are emotions that are predicated on you having done something. If you teach somebody something and then they accomplish something, you feel pride in their accomplishment. But you can't feel that pride when you're in the audience at a movie or when you're reading a book, because you didn't actually do anything. You can sort of, so anyway, in the same way that you don't feel fiero, you don't feel like a sense of accomplishment when you watch a movie. You just feel a sense of empathy. In a game, you can feel that, and you can feel najes. In this case, it's more of like I was in the child. Like I felt like the designer. Najes is sort of a shared emotion, or there is a complementary component to it that maybe also has a name, but if it does, I don't know it. But that's sort of what I was feeling. I was feeling sort of like the glow of accomplishing something not on my own, but with the help of somebody else. Oh my God. Okay, I just talked about that moment for so long, but that stuck with me. And that, like, to me, the designers, like Tim Schafer and the designers of Grim Fandango, take on a much more adversarial role, right? They are putting puzzles in front of us, or Half-Life, for example. The designers of those games put challenges in front of me because they want them to be hard, and they want me to struggle to overcome them and feel fiero, feel a sense of accomplishment when I overcome them, because I feel challenged. I feel like I have bested the game designer, or I have bested the game at least. And that's not how I feel about Antichamber. I don't feel like I beat that game. I feel like that game took me on a journey and I completed it. And it's a very different feeling, in sort of a subtle way, I guess, but absolutely distinct, at least for me. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to talk to, and then I swear to God, I'll answer some questions. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is had a conversation a couple weeks ago with Evil Oatmeal on Twitter, and then he asked a question last week that was on the same topic, and then also asked that question in the forum, and I've failed to properly address it every time. I apologize, by the way, people who have been posting in the forum. There's been some really cool discussions going on there in the last week. I've been kind of overwhelmed this last week, so I've not had much time or energy to chime in over there. I apologize for that. But I'm glad that other people have been having really interesting discussions over there while I haven't been around. But nonetheless, I did want to address this. So Evil Oatmeal has sort of pointed out, and I don't think he's on chat tonight, but he'll see this on the VOD probably. Pointed out we had a discussion about the idea of playing games wrong. And what that means, and whether it's possible, and if it is possible, then whose responsibility is it? Is it the player's responsibility or the designer's? And I tend to be of the opinion, coming at this from a designer's perspective, absolutely a game can be played wrong. I see games played wrong all the time. They're almost always my games, and I see them played wrong because I know how they're supposed to be played, and people aren't playing them that way in playtests. And invariably, that's because I fucked up the game somehow. Like, the game is not right. If the game was designed properly, then the player would play it properly. If the player's not playing it properly, that is absolutely my fault as the designer for not anticipating whatever the player is thinking and doing, for not understanding what the player's experience is going to be and what they're going to be motivated to do because of that experience. I think Oatmeal, because he's got a different perspective, coming at this more as a gamer than a game designer. His definition, understanding of what it means to play a game wrong is different than mine, and has more to do with what is sort of mechanically possible in the game, or somehow otherwise permitted, like mechanically, and sort of goes more into a space of game glitching and speed running, and maybe even modding. I don't know. We didn't actually talk about that. I apologize if I'm misrepresenting this position, because obviously he's not here to articulate it himself. But this is paraphrasing, I think. So anyway, this kind of led up to a specific instance in Antichamber where I don't remember what segment it was, but at one point when I had the yellow gun, I want to say, I actually managed to get into the section called the chase, the end game part of the game. I walked down the corridor a little ways. I said, first of all, I feel like I shouldn't have been able to get here. I feel like I glitched the game somehow by doing what I did to get through that sort of blocking door. And then yeah, I may have actually had the green gun and not even the yellow gun. Regardless, I didn't have the red gun. Did Twitch go down? Oh, shoot. Okay, I am, this is still recording for the VOD. I think it's coming back. I'm going to stall for just a second. So, God, I have nothing to stall with. Sorry, guys. Antichamber was really cool, wasn't it? Yeah, okay. But yeah, if I had a cat, my cat is sleeping across the room. There's nothing I can do with my cat. I can sort of sing and dance, except I can't sing, and I really can't dance either. Okay. Yeah, sorry guys, especially if you're watching this on YouTube after the fact. I apologize for all of this. Just retroactively skip over this 60 seconds. Question from the chat, stalling, what did I have for breakfast? I had a protein shake for breakfast this morning. I feel like all I eat anymore is protein shakes, and it's getting unsustainable. But I had a really good barbecue tofu sandwich for lunch, and that made up for it. Okay, I think we're mostly back. Stream seems laggy. I apologize, guys. I'm going to keep going and hope that it stays up at least for a little while longer. Okay, so here's the point. Here's what I was talking about. I felt like I glitched through that gate, through that doorway. I got to the end sequence of the game before I was supposed to. I think I probably said exactly that. I think that was a glitch. I don't think I'm supposed to be through here. This looks like the end of the game. I don't think I'm supposed to be here yet. And then I turned around and I went back, and I started looking around for different puzzles. At some point, I'm sure that I said, like, I'm stuck. I don't know where to go next. And then I looked around for more puzzles. Eventually, at some point, I was looking for the white gun, which turned out to not be a thing. Eventually, I found the red gun, and then I was trying to get that. But the fact remains that, I had found an area that I even said, this seems like this is further along than anything else. This is the way to the end of the game. And I didn't pursue it. There was, so basically Oatmeal's question was like, why the hell not? What was I doing? What was I thinking? If that is towards the end of the game, then why didn't I pursue that direction? And does it relate to this idea that I don't want to play the game wrong? Wrong meaning, in my mind, against the designer's intention. And if I can try to divine the designer's intention, even if it's not strictly aligned with the experience of the game, am I more likely to ignore the actual experience of the game in order to try to placate the hypothetical designer's intentions? So the answer to that is probably, yeah, to some extent that's true. I mean, and it's probably more obvious to you guys than it is to me to some extent, because I'm where I am and playing subjectively, and you guys are on the outside watching what I'm doing. But there are also a couple other things that sort of happened that weren't really necessarily obvious that I wanted to mention. One is at some point I stopped being of the opinion that I had glitched the game to get through that door. At the time, that was sort of the first... I was still learning how to use the guns, and there were mechanics that I wasn't familiar with. And that was a type of mechanic that I hadn't seen anywhere else. And so it felt weird. Like it was very unexpected the way that I got through that door. Then I experienced a bunch of puzzles where I had to do very similar things and manipulate blocks in that way, and that became much more normal. And so it stopped seeming like I had broken the game at that point and started feeling like, yeah, that's a way that you can solve puzzles in this game. I still felt like, for whatever reason, it very much presented itself as this is the way that you go for the end content. And at some point, honestly, well, so there probably was some element of, I'm not supposed to be here, let me go back to where I'm supposed to be. But honestly, more than that, it was, I went down that hallway and there was nothing to do. I didn't know how to proceed. There was just a big white wall, and there was an elevator in the floor, and I didn't know how to use the elevators as like trampolines. So I didn't know how to go forward. And my assumption at that point, which may or may not have been at all correct, was that I didn't have the tools to actually see the end content. So it became less like I'm not supposed to be here because I glitched my way through a doorway that I wasn't supposed to go through, and now I'm in a part of the game that I'm not allowed to see. And more, okay, maybe I glitched my way through, or maybe I solved the puzzle early, but I got through a doorway and I got to a place where now I can't proceed without the red gun. So I need that red gun in order to go further. Now, it turns out I didn't need the red gun. And if I'd known that I didn't need the red gun, then maybe it would have felt more valid for me to go forward. Although, honestly, I also sort of, I do want to desire, I do have a desire to experience sort of, absolutely not 100% of the content, but sort of like a representative experience of the content. And so I feel like if there's a way for me to skip out early, if there are 4 guns and I can technically win with only 3 of them, but then I miss sort of like a whole quarter of the game, then there's a part of me that sort of feels like I want to play through that quarter of the game, because especially in a game like this, where again, I don't feel like my goal was to beat it. I don't feel like my goal was to like outthink it and overcome it. I feel like my goal was to like learn it. I felt like it was trying to teach me itself, and I wanted to understand it better. I don't think that actually answers my question. I think the question gets more into how, I don't know. I think there's the question. I could talk about that question all day, and we could go back and forth. I am going to answer 2 or 3 actual questions that you guys have tonight, and then we're going to take another break, and then we're going to do general topics Q&A. So question that has come up a couple times, wanting to talk about my journey versus Day 9's journey through Antichamber. Specifically with the question of the elevators. Like I said, I sort of didn't understand the elevators until the last section of the game. Or I only halfway understood the elevators. Like I figured out very early on how to go down in an elevator if I had blocks that I could use to sort of like push it down. But I didn't figure out that I could use them as springs. And apparently, Day 9, when he played the game, had the opposite experience, where he figured out very early on that he could use them to jump to high places, but not that he could actually go down in them by blocking them with cubes. I don't know, like, I don't have a ton to say about that. I think that it's fascinating that the game has that kind of not just spatial nonlinearity. Like, it's not just possible to skip some puzzles and like arrive at different places in different ways or from different directions. And there were definitely, I think, looking at the map, there are implied loops that like you could go in either of 2 different ways and solve a whole sequence of puzzles. But that you can actually sort of skip entire mechanics and still progress through the game, maybe through the whole game. I think there's probably a way that I could have gotten through that last part. I don't know if I could have gotten through the whole last part, because there were 2 elevator jumps that I had to do. There were 2 elevator jumps that I had to do. So I don't know. I don't know if I actually could have done that, but I could have. I got through almost the whole game, and without understanding that mechanic. And certainly, I got through like lots of other parts in the main game where I could have used that mechanic, I bet, and never figured that out. So I think it's a testament to the design, and I think that like the design was very well thought out, and then it was play tested really well to make sure that those kinds of things were possible, and that to really try to help players who miss mechanics still be able to make progress in the game, and to try to help them sort of come to those mechanics later, even if they don't find them in the same sequence that other players find them. I think the game's really well designed. I think it's really thoughtfully done, and I think that it's ambitious in a way that few games are, because what it is trying to do is hard. That kind of nonlinearity of mechanics is really, really difficult, and it's impressive that it pulls it off. Even if it doesn't pull it off necessarily perfectly, the extent to which it pulls it off is kind of stunning. The stream went down at an inopportune time. So how did I actually figure out the jumping mechanic of elevators and trampolines? So that one and the circle, the circle allowed me to walk through glass, are both things that were suggested or hinted at outside of the context of the game. Either in chat or in other discussion of the of Antichamber. Nobody told me what those mechanics were, but it was suggested well enough to me. I got the idea that there were mechanics related to those things that I hadn't understood, and then at that point, the trampoline was just a thought experiment. Like, that's obvious enough, honestly, that sitting, like laying in bed at night, thinking about, gosh, there's some kind of a mechanic related to those elevators that I haven't figured out. I wonder what it could be. That they're springy. I know that they're springy. I've seen them be springy. I thought, I wonder if I could use them as trampolines. I bet that's it. The circles I didn't figure out until I actually experimented them in the game. And I only needed to experiment with it, I guess, for like a few minutes. Like, it didn't take me that long, and that probably is partially because I knew that there was a mechanic I was missing. Although, honestly, it put me in that space, like it put me in that little cube room, so that there was very little that I could do other than eventually figure out how to get through it. So I think I probably would have figured that one out naturally, even if I'd had no outside suggestion. But the trampoline, that one was a little bit, that definitely helped. That I was thinking about it as something that I hadn't figured out yet. Somebody says that they remember an interview with the developer stating that people that were non-gamers had an easier time playing than gamers did. What are my thoughts on this? That's good. I mean, I think that makes some amount of sense to me. A lot of the mechanics in this game, especially so if I split this game, I would split this game up into 6 parts. There's the part before you get any guns, and then there's the part after you get each of the 4 guns, and then there's actually the chase. Which is separate than the part after you get the red gun, because there's stuff that you can do in the world, and in fact maybe some stuff that you have to do, although I don't know if that's true, that you can do that you need the red gun, or you use the red gun in order to do, that isn't related to the actual chase end game. So there's 6 parts to the game. The mechanics from the first part are very much mechanics that are unlike other games, right? That sort of use the trappings of a first-person shooter style game, shooter platformer, but subvert the actual mechanics of that genre in order to present you with completely different kinds of mechanics around moving and looking and space changing in unexpected but predictable ways, like all of those kinds of things that are that you would never put in a typical game. And you would never put them in a typical game because a typical game is not about those things, and so those things would be incredibly confusing to a player. If a player is playing a game where the point of the game is to like shoot enemies, or the point of the game is to I don't know, move through a narrative space, or something like that, then actually putting in these kinds of mechanics where like it matters where you're looking or what direction, like it matters if you walk backwards or if you stare at a wall for long enough, or space curves around in a completely unexpected way. Like, not that you can't build some of those mechanics into a game, but those mechanics become distractions from the game in a way that creates a potentially incredibly negative experience. And so they're also difficult to design. And so if there's not a reason for you to design them, then they're just going to take away from the player's experience. You would never ever put them in a game. Therefore, and also because there is kind of like a culture of, like, we have tropes. We have an understanding of what a first-person platformer or first-person shooter is going to be like. We have all played 100 of them, and so we know what the commonalities between them are. That's true for developers too. Developers who say, I'm going to make a first-person platformer, they start from a place of, okay, this is what all first-person platformers are like. Let's start there. And sometimes that's not conscious. Sometimes that's just like, that's what you do. That's how you think, because that's what culture is like. That's why it's important to bring in people who are not like totally rooted in the game culture, who have outside experiences, to bring in people who either are not gamers or are gamers but also are from outside of the gamer mainstream to design games, because they don't have the same kinds of preconceptions. But the fact is, almost everybody who designs games has those preconceptions, because we're all gamers, and so it's incredibly rare to have games that subvert those very, very basic expectations. Therefore, somebody who is used to playing games is going to come in with expectations of what this game is going to be like, and those expectations are going to be are not going to be met, and it's not always obvious how they're not met, and you're often asked to solve puzzles around subverting your own expectations. Whereas somebody who doesn't have those expectations in the first place, or doesn't have them as strongly, is not going to have as much of a barrier to get past. Oh, that felt like a really long-winded answer to that question. Sorry. Okay, maybe one more. If you end up having time to watch it, love to hear your thoughts on the forum after you see Sean P. Day9's playthrough, to see how a different perspective on the game might change your own. Yeah, I would like to do that. Hopefully, I'll find some time to do that. It's nice that it's not a super long game, so hopefully that'll happen. And then because I'm also really curious to compare what my experience was compared with his. Cool. Awesome. I'm gonna look real quick. There are lots of good questions that I think I don't have enough time to give proper answers to. Oh, there is. Okay, so here's one question from last week about possibility space that I think is really interesting, that I'm not really going to answer, but I'm just going to address. So the question is, do you think there is such a thing as a possibility space that's too big for a game like Antichamber? So yes, absolutely. I think that having a possibility space that's too large is really deadly in a game, because a player just doesn't know what to do, right? It's kind of a, like, in a creative game, it's a blank page problem, right? If you are given no structure, then it's really difficult to come up with something. Whereas if you're given some structure, then you can be really imaginative within that structure. And And if it's a problem-solving game like Antichamber, then maybe it's exactly the same problem. If you give me an infinite possibility space, or if you just give me a possibility space that's too large, then I don't know where to start. I don't know what to go to first. And even more than that, like even if I can come up with a thing to go to first, there was a lot of Antichamber, there were a lot of mechanics in Antichamber that I just needed time to process, to like wrap my head around. And, you know, I talked about this idea of self-efficacy, and I think that's very related in a game like this to possibility space. If you put me in a small glass room where I literally can't go anywhere, I'm just trapped in this tiny cube, and there's a circle on the wall, there's like my possibility space is really limited. And so first of all, I'm much more likely to stumble onto the solution to the puzzle if I don't already know it, and just because there's only so many things I can try. And then second of all, this is like I'm aware of this. I have a sense of this. I have a sense that I'm how likely it is that I'm going to find the solution. And if I feel like the possibility space is really large, then I feel like I'm probably just not ever going to find the solution. And that's dispiriting. And then I no longer want to try because it just seems hopeless. Whereas if the possibility space is small, or relatively small, if it's at least contained, if I can sort of wrap my head around the possibility space, then even if I have no idea what to do, I still feel like if I just try it for long enough, if I just try enough things, if I just explore the limits of that possibility space, then I'll be able to figure it out. And so that sort of motivates me to keep trying. That's my thoughts on possibility space. Okay, so last question is whether or not Thomas Was Alone is going to be the next game. I don't 100% know the answer to that. Thomas Was Alone is not going to be the next game. I am planning on doing a play-by-play on Saturday. I don't know what the game is going to be, but I think I'm going to be looking for something short. A week from today, I'm going to be doing a couple short games, because one of them is a demo for a game that I'm really excited about called Apartment, that is launching its Kickstarter next week. And so I'm going to play that game a week from today. So I don't want to start a long game right before that. Also, I tried to boot up Thomas Was Alone and can't get the graphics to work with my streaming setup. So I'm going to play with that a little bit more. If I can get it to work, then Thomas Was Alone might be on the menu in a couple weeks. Otherwise, I might start something else entirely, in which case there will probably be a poll, or at the very least, I'm going to go through the suggestion thread that's on the forum and take a look at that and pull some ideas from that. Yeah, not 100% sure what we're going to do on Saturday, but I will... I'll let you guys know as soon as I figure it out. And there may be, I'll probably post up a poll about that as well. So check out the forum. If you don't know it, it's undefinedbehavior.com/forum. And that will have information about upcoming shows, and that's where the suggestion thread is, and that's where I'll put a poll if we narrow down to a couple different games. Cool, guys, thanks. I'm gonna take a short break. I'm gonna come back. We're gonna do some AMA stuff, and I have a bunch of questions that were asked on the forum that I will try to get through. And yeah, I am going to leave you now with a song by Philip Eberhardt from the soundtrack of that game, Apartment, track called May, that is very pretty. and I'm, like I said, I'm really looking forward to this game. So I'll see you in just a minute.